My name is Tonje Gjevjons. I'm an artist, a woman, and a lesbian from Norway. I do not believe in the concept of gender identity, and I insist on my right to reject this belief system and put into words how degrading and damaging the inclusion of gender identities into Norwegian law and society in general are, especially for young lesbians, but also to adult human homosexuals. I do believe some girls, women, boys and men suffer from gender dysphoria or eternal homophobia, and I believe we need to address this as a psychological issue. What I define as the queer factory are the LGBT plus organizations, the trans queer organizations, and the non-governmental organizations, and the way they fabricate and produce ideas and material about gender identities and support the belief that the child can be born in the wrong body and that it is possible to change your sex. Young lesbians in Europe are experiencing that their same-sex attraction is questioned and under pressure. Young lesbians in UK, Germany, Norway, Iceland, Finland and other European countries have been exposed to and have experienced emotional blackmail, harassment, discrimination, pressure, hostility and manipulation from trans queer activist groups. The pressure from these trans queer LGBTQI2+ organizations like Stonewall in UK, Foreningen Fri in Norway, Samtokin22 in Iceland, on young lesbians to include men as lesbians are unacceptable. The fact that the integrity of young lesbians is violated by the very organizations that claim that they protect and care for lesbians and homosexual men are unacceptable. It is traumatizing for young lesbians to experience that their sexual orientation based on same-sex attraction is not accepted, respected by the very organization that receive funding from the governments to protect their homosexual sexual orientation, or their just the homosexual orientation. The very core of being a female homosexual is about the right to exclude men however they identify and relate exclusively to women when it comes to sexual and romantic attraction. Young lesbians are about to establish a European organization, and they will not accept any sort of pressure or suggestions that indicates they ought to reorientate their same-sex orientation. Young lesbians are female homosexual, and they and we, adult homosexuals, at this conference expect our politicians, governments and friends to defend our right to live as lesbians and reject the very idea that men can be lesbians. The young lesbians and we, the adult homosexuals, do not trust the LGBTQI+ organization, who for many years have told homosexual women and men that men identifying as lesbians or men fetishizing being lesbians, in fact, are lesbians. At this stage in 2023, there are no lesbian female-only venues where young lesbians can meet and enjoy each other's company, dance, talk, flirt, have a drink, and just be young lesbians together. So on behalf of young lesbians, we adult lesbians and gay men reclaim the right to lesbian female-only places, venues, and events. And we expect our governments and politicians to understand and respect and support our organizations financially. And we expect our governments to acknowledge young lesbians as a same-sex attracted minority and support their upcoming organization financially to make sure that young female homosexuals are given the possibility to develop their lesbian same-sex only events and culture. I also recently increased access to children and women's body because that is in Norway, that is the agenda for the queer factory.
Immer wieder tauchen Gruppen mit vermummten Transaktivisten auf. Sie versuchen auf die Frauen loszugehen, werden aber jedes Mal von der Polizei abgeführt.
Wir sind eine Gruppe lesbischer Frauen. Wir fühlen uns als lesbische Frauen nicht mehr in dieser sogenannten queeren Community, LGBTQ-Community willkommen. Wir werden angegriffen, physisch. Wir wollen keinen Sex haben oder auch nicht daten. Männer, egal was sie sagen, wer sie sind, als was sie sagen, dass sie sich identifizieren. Da kamen uns mehrere Gruppen entgegen, größtenteils Männer, über 90%, sage ich jetzt mal. Die waren auch komplett schwarz vermummt, haben uns angebrüllt, haben versucht, uns anzuspringen. Die Polizei hat glücklicherweise ihren Job gemacht. In anderen Städten ist es manchmal nicht so. Also mir ist persönlich schon passiert, ich wurde mehrmals körperlich angegriffen von Transaktivisten, auch von Männern. Und ich finde es unsäglich, dass es toleriert wird und dass das irgendwas mit den Rechten von Homosexuellen zu tun haben soll, was es ja gar nicht hat. Wir werden angegriffen von diesen Leuten.
So, the 1st of October 2022, I made a Facebook post. I knew exactly what I wanted to express, how to express it and write it, and yes, I knew I would get in trouble, or I expected to get in trouble. I basically wrote that men cannot be women or lesbian women, no matter what they identify as, and that being a lesbian is not a fetish men can wear. In the Facebook post, I named and dead-named a prominent trans activist claiming to be a lesbian, a mother, and a woman. He is in fact a father, a man, an adult heterosexual man, and he is employed as an advisor at the national LGBT organization in Norway. As I said, I knew this Facebook post could get me in trouble. Gender identity and gender expression were added to the hate speech section of the Norwegian Penal Code in 2020. Violators of the law can face fines or up to 3 years in prison. The day before I posted my Facebook post, the Norwegian Supreme Court had convicted a man for hate speech. According to the court, the man had made degrading and punishable posts on Facebook about the man identifying as a woman in 2021. A Facebook post that was potentially seen by 585 people. The ruling created precedents, and for the first time, the Norwegian Supreme Court upheld a conviction under the hate speech section for not recognizing another person's gender identity. I found the conviction absurd and wrong, so I deliberately used some of the same wordings in my Facebook post. In November, I received a letter from the police with a report and summons for questioning. It was the National Competence Center in Hate Crime that had reported the case based on an anonymous tip, and in December I appeared for questioning at the police station. As an artist, a woman and a lesbian, I have since self-ID came into Norwegian law experienced the culture of abuse and harassment developed and legitimized in the wake of the legislation of gender identity. The conviction in Supreme Court is relevant to lesbians because the judgment deprives lesbians of the ability to call out abusive behavior, sexual harassment, and discrimination among men, regardless of what gender identity they wear. Lesbians must be able to call out abusive behavior by men without having to be careful or sensitive of the words we use. I made my post to challenge and display an indefensible law and the Norwegian Parliament's indefensible handling on the concept gender identity. The intention of including homosexuals in the hate speech law was to protect homosexual men and lesbians from sexual harassment, discrimination, and dehumanizations. By including gender identity in the hate speech law, the Parliament gave any man identifying as a lesbian protection in the same law that protected lesbians from sexual harassment, discrimination, and incitement. And by writing this Facebook post, I wanted to reveal this flaw. In 2016, the Norwegian Parliament approved on one of the most extreme self-ID laws in the world, So without any assessment, and it went through without any assessment of consequences. Children from they are 6 years old can change their legal sex without any consultation or diagnosis, and with the consent of only one parent, but may also have their self-declaration of sex accepted without any consenting parents. Neither is it necessary for married couples to inform their spouse of a change of legal sex. And this is, as I see it, regardless if it is intentional or not, a law designed to split up families and also the gay and lesbian community. The population of Norway were told that self-ID law would have no impact on others than a few transsexuals, but in my and many others' experiences, this is not the case. In 2017, I kicked off the debate on gender identity and sex in Norway. This was the same year and just after the prominent lesbian radical feminist Julia Bindel from United Kingdom was invited to have a talk on the Socialist Party Women's Conference in Oslo, in Norway. And when the party's LGBT group accused Bindel of being a transphobe, her invitation was retracted, resulting in her being cancelled and non-platformed. And it was this incident that made me realize that legislation related to gender identity affected more than just a few transsexuals. I did my research, and as an external columnist in a national newspaper, I kicked off the national debate related to legislation of gender identity, transactivism, and its impact on women and girls, lesbians, women, medicalization of homosexual children, and the queering of language in 2017. When I started publishing articles about how the concept gender identity and self-ID laws in Norway conflicted with women and lesbian and gay rights, I was contacted by parents of children with rapid onset gender dysphoria. I participated in meetings in Norway and Sweden, where I also met and talked to young women and lesbians who had detransitioned. One of them was Sameti from Finland, who participated in the Swedish documentary Trans Train and the Teenage Girls. Sameti, who found out she was a lesbian after detransitioning, told her story at the meeting I participated in. She said, "I am stuck forever being a woman with no breasts, no ovaries, no uterus, and no vagina. I am infertile and can never have a child even if I wanted to. My body does not produce any hormones anymore." In an article called A Silent Revolution, I asked for an investigation into whether the ideologies or belief system presented by the Queer Factory in Norway are in themselves homophobic. I also asked if the systematic introduction of gender ideology has been assessed for the effect this may have on young homosexuals. I wrote about the Queer Factory and its attempt to remove the words and language dedicated to the female body, so it cannot be found offensive by men claiming to be, identifying as, or fetishizing being a woman, lesbian, or a mother. And together with Christina Ellingsen, spokeswoman for Women Declaration in Norway, I wrote about the fact that women's rights and needs for single-sex spaces were not considered when self-ID laws were developed and approved by the parliament in Norway. The way I have been treated by politicians, journalists, editors, and the Queer Factory in Norway is unethical, cruel, and abusive. As a response to my articles, I was framed as, in the text, transphobia in Norwegian by a commentator in the very newspaper that had wanted me to write about issues attached to transactivism and the inclusion of self-ID in laws. In 2023, I wrote an article where I pointed out that the editors in Norwegian national press have been and still are acting as transactivists, and that their reluctance on Norwegian editors to delve into the topic has contributed to delaying the public debate around this topic. It is safe to assume that since 2018, the media has annually contributed to as many as 400 to 600 teenage girls and boys being at risk for mistreatment. As I see it, it is important for lesbians to participate in debates regarding the definition of and the very core of what a woman and a lesbian is, and to articulate how self-ID, both in law and through trans activism, affects us as same-sex attracted women. I have participated in debates and put into words and song lyrics my experiences, reflections, and opinions. My opinions is out there in the open, and anyone who disagrees have the opportunity to argue and participate in the debate. But instead of participating in the debate, the Queer Factory are framing anyone who disagree with their beliefs as Nazis. My intention in writing about sex, the concept of gender identity and trans activism, the inclusion of gender identity in law, and the changing of the language, especially regarding the female body, is to make people aware of the potential consequences and harm the inclusion of gender identity in law represents. So, the international newspapers and TV stations reported on my case. It went all around the world. And the Queer Factory and trans activists in Norway could no longer control the narrative, because as long as it was national, they controlled the narrative and framed anyone like me objecting to self-ID as Nazis, but now they just experienced they couldn't control the whole world. So newspapers all over the world reported on the case, and also Great Britain News, which said they did this thing.
And I want to ask you, how is it possible for men to be a lesbian?
How is it possible for men to be a lesbian? Okay, so this story was all over the internet this week. There's a lesbian filmmaker and actress, Tonje Gjevjons, who's facing up to 3 years in prison in Norway for saying that a man cannot be a lesbian. Now, this is an interesting... Leo, because are you a lesbian? You've made that claim before, haven't you?
Yeah, I think men make the best lesbians. She's wrong about this. No, it's interesting. She's actually facing 3 years in jail just for saying that men can't be lesbians, which is kind of factually correct.
Yeah.
It's interesting how quickly the left went from supporting LGBT rights to incarcerating LGBT people for saying that they exist.
Right, because this is a gay individual.
Yeah, yeah.
Right, so this is... It's sort of flipped to a kind of fantastical levels at this point, isn't it? Like jail time for saying something we all know to be true.
Yeah, and even by the rules of woke people, men can't be lesbians because, basically, if a man or a biological male then says he's a woman, self-identifies as a woman, then he's not a man anymore.
That's right, they say then he's a woman, therefore he's a lesbian.
Yeah, absolutely.
So actually this is violating rules on all sides of the cultural debate, right?
Yeah.
This doesn't make any sense.
So, I mean, the safe thing to do would not be to send this lesbian woman to jail for 3 years for saying it.
How about we don't send anyone to jail for anything they say? That would be a great start, wouldn't it? You know, that whole freedom of speech thing. You've got your First Amendment in America. It wouldn't happen there, would it?
No, of course, nothing like this ever happens in America. No craziness.
These are glory years to be a misogynist.
Yeah, just
it's
to watch...
incredible. You can cheer on a biological male punching a woman in the face, and you're the good person. You're the woke progressive person.
I mean, it is astonishing.
Is Leo just agreeing with me?
And that shouldn't happen. Isn't this astonishing, though, Lewis? I mean, on a serious point, like the freedom of speech debate, and people say there is no threat to freedom of speech, but here you have someone actually potentially serving jail time for saying something that 99% of people believe to be the case. How can we have reached this point?
I think I think we can reach that point because I tell you why. Because we're heading to a place where you can't offend anybody.
So, while I was under police investigation, the self-declared lesbian, who is a man, Christina Jentoft, and his fellow trans activists were criticizing the police for their actions. They now surprisingly claimed they didn't want me to be investigated or convicted for emphasizing that men cannot be lesbians. So, the picture idea of a lesbian artist taken to court for calling out heterosexual men claiming to be lesbians made the trans activists backtrack. Mr. Jentoft did, according to himself, call the police several times to make them drop the case, and this to me was an act of panic. Mr. Jentoft is the same man that reported Christina Ellingsen, spokeswoman for Women Declaration in Norway, to the police. She was interrogated at the police station for 9 hours and had to wait 6 months before they found that she was entitled to express all the tweets Mr. Jentoft had reported. LGB Alliance read about my case and contacted me. And in 2023, LGB Alliance, together with Lesbian Neighbour, organized the Lesbian Not Criminal Roadshow in London, Edinburgh, Cardiff, Leeds and Manchester, where we as lesbians talked about our experiences due to the inclusion of self-ID in law. Same day as the tour started, I received a letter from the police saying, "You are hereby notified that the case against you has been dismissed because..." Dismissed? Yeah, one more time. You are hereby notified that the case against you has been dismissed because no criminal offense is considered proven. This means that the investigation strongly suggests that nothing punishable has happened. So, this is me. As a child and teenager, I stood out because of my physical appearance, activities, and interests. As a so-called tomboy, I was often mistaken for a boy, but I did not understand why this misunderstanding took place. I didn't realize that my haircut, the way I dressed, or my talent and passion for football and wrestling had anything to do with being perceived as a girl or a boy. To me, it was just a reflection of my personal taste, interests, and the joy of being able to develop my talent in sport and express my personality. Luckily, no one suggested I had the identity of a boy, but the repetitive misunderstanding led me to believe that I had an error. My fear was that if this error was articulated, it would separate me forever from my parents. I was a shy child who, when not playing football, preferred to be in my room, sorting out my stamps and football cards. Unwanted attention, especially if focused on my personality, scared me. I had no tools to handle it. Had I grown up today and the Queer Factory had visited my school and talked about some girls are gender non-conforming and some of these gender non-conforming girls may have the identity of a boy, it would unavoidably draw unwanted attention to me, the awkward tomboy. As a child, I had no tools to handle the attention today's Norway as a society is forcing on tomboys like me. I truly believe it would have broken my dignity, confirmed my deepest fears, and caused me a severe psychological meltdown, trauma, and irreversible damage. I had a heavy puberty, and puberty hurts, and nothing or no one could have stopped me from jumping on the trans train. But today, I am a lesbian with an intact body. I have been happily married for 23 years with my wife, filming my presentation here. And I know about the power of love, trust, tenderness, and the passion and the beauty of sexuality. I have been part of the lesbian and gay culture since I was 16 years old, and I have enjoyed the gay nightlife and subculture. Together with my wife, Edith, I have commented on the development of the LGBT culture and politics since 1999, through art, music, debates, on TV, in newspapers, hearings, and gay magazines. Increased access to women's and children's bodies has been on the LGBTQI agenda for years. And when the Norwegian LGBT organizations started arguing and lobbying for legalization of surrogacy and the legalization of buying sex from prostitutes around 2013, I and Edith expressed our views on these topics. The attempt to legalize surrogacy and decriminalize buying sex from women and young men in prostitution is what I describe as an attempt to get increased access to women and children's bodies. I strongly disagree with this agenda and me and my wife have published articles about it. As a response, we were called man-hating lesbians and accused of hate speech. This is from a lesbian club, the only lesbian club we had in Norway, and it's from it's like a butch fun evening with a dancing competition where some lesbian dressed with suits and some lesbian dressed otherwise. And this is one of the events me and my wife organized, and it was full, and the lesbians were standing outside the venue because they wanted to be inside, and it was full. In 2015, I and Edith and two other lesbians founded an organization for lesbians named the Lesbian Forbund, and the prominent Norwegian gay rights activist Karen Kristine Friele became an honorary member. In 2015, we organized a festival dedicated to lesbians. So we had the typical lesbian competition, like it's called arm wrestling, isn't it? Yeah. And it was really fun. As a professional artist, I have made and produced films, music videos, performances, visual art, and songs commenting on the issue related to women, lesbians, and the female body, gender roles, and the LGBT culture. My main art project is the lesbian performance group Hungry Hearts, who participated in the Norwegian final of the Eurovision Song Contest in 2016 with a song called Laika. The same year, we released our first album called Die Forever, which also has a song called Lesbian Queen. Hungry Hearts has performed at the contemporary art scene in Norway for 16 years, and our short art music videos have been screened in more than 50 international film festivals and participated with performances at Pride in Stockholm, Tel Aviv, Köln, Oslo, and Pride in Guangzhou in China, to mention some. So I have a legitimately few, if any, other Norwegian lesbian of my generation have, and my commitment to lesbians, women, and children's rights is traceable. And when I started the debate on sex versus gender identity in 2017, I thought it would be possible to have a debate where different perspectives could stand next to each other, but I was wrong. In 2017, I and Hungry Hearts was invited by an art museum to participate at an exhibition who aimed to have several perspectives on the gender identity sex issue. I was invited due to my focus on the female body, gender roles, LGBT subculture, and as a leading debater on the issues. I told the curator that trans activists would demand the museum to cancel me, but the curator assured me that the museum would not give in to any activism. I worked for 5 or 6 months to develop the performance Hungry Hearts were to have on the opening day of the exhibition. And some days before the opening, I received a phone call from the curator who told me I was not allowed to perform our song called Vagina Anthem, which I had made for the opening performance. She said the lyric had the potential to hurt and offend men who did not have a vagina. She also said the museum could not ensure my safety. This is, as I see it, discrimination of lesbians and the lesbian artists' right to express themselves through art. The museum received a lot of emails from trans activists. One man identifying as a woman claimed that to let me and Hungry Hearts have a performance at the opening of the exhibition for many trans people would feel as offensive as if David Irving, the Holocaust denier, had been asked to speak at the opening of an exhibition about Holocaust. In 2020, I signed an agreement for an exhibition with the art venue named Kunstplass, Contemporary Art. This exhibition was supposed to happen in 2022 as part of the Queer Culture Year in Norway. The agreement was that I was to create a solo exhibition with works by a lesbian artist who died in 2020. In November 2021, the curator called me and said that their art gallery could not show the exhibition with a lesbian artist. She said it would ruin her reputation as a curator to be associated with my name, and she said my name was blacklisted. As I see it, I was counseled by Kunstplass because I have been a high-profile commentator on lesbian and women's rights. Kunstplass expressed in a newspaper that their cancellation of me was based on my values without specifying which values are in question. Through my union, Visual Artists, I have taken legal action against the invalid violation of the contract and compensation, and our first meeting is later in September this year. And in March 2022, trans activists contacted my wife's employees in what I regard as an attempt to silence and destroy me by destroying her career too. My wife stood by my side to protect me as my bodyguard at the Women's Day demonstration on the 8th of March 2022. Here, Women Declaration Norway and I had the audacity to carry a placard with the text "Trans women are men," and a photo of this was posted on Twitter. So my wife was accused of spreading hate and deemed unfit for a job by merely being present near this placard, standing next to me for protection. My wife has worked hard for decades to build her career, and this has led to her being a professor of nursing. Because of my engagement for women and lesbians' dignity, needs and rights, trans activists found it necessary to ruin her career, take away her livelihood. The thought of being the indirect reason for ruining my wife's career was unbearable. We contacted an experienced and expensive lawyer, and my wife kept her job, but this experience caused both of us psychological harm. Until 2017, in Norway, it was possible to debate these issues fiercely one moment and then go to a bar and have a drink with people who disagree with you. But the second gender self-ID was introduced into Norwegian law in 2016, this ended. Instead, the slogan was "No debate, no debate, no debate." But it is not just about ending debate. It's also about attempts to remove the livelihood of lesbians, bisexual and heterosexual women's campaigners. So I have been through 6 years with dishonest representation of what I said and written. I have been ridiculed, exposed to harassment and targeted campaigns where LGBTQI activists inside and outside the LGBTQI organization have represented me as hateful, as a transphobe, translator and vagina fetishist who collaborates with or is associated with fascism, nazism, extreme right-wing, communist and Christian conservatives. None of these descriptions are true. This is harmful because it sends a clear signal to all young lesbians that this is how we treat lesbians in Norway. What I have been writing about since 2017 has been confirmed in an official report on patient safety for children and young people with gender incongruence in Norway, published in 2023. This report is called the UCOM report. And I can't emphasize enough the importance that LGB are represented by responsible adults who understand the difference between sex and gender, adults and children, and between private and official policy of sexual fetishes. Humans can't run from nor change their sex. As a result of the inclusion of gender identity in laws, lesbians are exposed to ruthless pressure, emotional blackmail, harassment and discrimination due to the idea that men identifying as women are women, and that these so-called women are lesbians if they say so. Homosexuality is same-sex attraction. The very notion that men identifying as lesbians or women are and should be regarded a perverted definition of women and lesbians. Women and lesbian women are not identities men can feel or wear. It is as delusional as the notion that homosexual men have a female brain. There are actual conflicts between lesbians, women, and the realization of the concept gender identity. And to solve this, we must confirm through legislation that in all situations where sex is relevant, practical, legal, or administrative, biological sex must be taken as basis. And if you care for lesbian and gays, children and women, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, do not look to Norway. Listen to organizations like Samtokin22, LGBT Alliance, and the brilliant Kelly J. Keane, aka Posey Parker, and J.K. Rowling, and dare to listen to different perspectives. Thank you.